Continue. Okay, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Kauravani Pachaline Nivasesha Sunyavahari Pashtatadeshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so a humble request if someone or some of you or someone could have their camera on so I can see a human as well. It's great. I mean, I know you're all there and you're all humans, that's fine. But it's good. I like to thank you, Mother Rajkishore. Anyone else, you're welcome to have your cameras on. Thank you. Hare Krishna. All right, let's say that thing that we say every week, which millions of people are saying using Zoom. Let's share the screen. Let's share. Okay. So I guess you can see. Yes, Hare Krishna. So we won't go through this whole chapter. I'm just going to go to the last slide here. Anyone can remember what this slide is about? We finished on this last week.
Well, is Mother Ratnaranjini,
Yeah.
and she remembered Krishna at the time of passing away.
Yeah, she remembered Krishna and she had specifically gave details of her specific relationship and service to Krishna as revealed to her by Krishna. So the point here is that Maharaj brought up sometimes as a doubt that are there any Mahabhagavats, or in other words, you can only achieve perfection through the personal presence of a Mahabhagavat. No doubt that would be very good. But if that's not always available, then can we obtain perfection? So he gave the example of this Mother Ratnaranjini in Scotland, who was just a simple devotee. She wasn't well known throughout Europe even, but she was very dedicated to her service, which was temple secretary and also looking after the ladies in the ashram. And she had a terminal disease, brain cancer. Anyway, cut a long fascinating story short, she actually revealed her specific relationship with Krishna. Yeah, so that's given as a contemporary example of someone in our society who attained perfection. And no doubt she's not the only one. All right, so that's where we left off last week. So welcome, Mother Vishalni. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
You have your rivers. Hare Krishna. All right, so that was chapter 9, finishing. Okay, I just go over the slides and I try and tempt myself not to comment on each slide. You can look at the slide and say, oh, yes, I remember that. Okay, remember this? Yes, this, freedom from distress, we spoke about that. A little bit on Vaishnava Parad. Maharaj speaks about it later in Suddha Bhakti Cintamani. And when we mentioned about the Pandavas, Krishna, they attracted Krishna by their love and defining devotional service in practice. It's there within the heart. It naturally awakens through the process of sadhana. Sadhana means sadhana is that practice that leads to bhava, as Rupa Goswami explains. And then we describe this divine grace and sadhana and how they combine to invoke the mercy of the Lord, ways to obtain Krishna's grace. And we went through this, a wonderful explanation of the power of chanting the holy name by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Okay. Any questions as usual, please feel free to ask, or any clarifications or any reflections is also welcome. Okay, so let me share this chapter here. So regulative devotional service, chapter 10. So we just, in chapter 9, we spoke about the different characteristics of pure devotional service in 3 divisions: sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. So, and we gave their characteristics. In this chapter, chapter 10, Maharaj is going to speak specifically about sadhana bhakti, but in a bit more depth. So we're going to go into a bit more depth of the subject of sadhana. Yeah. Now, devotional service, again, this is coming from Rupa Goswami's Nectar Devotion, and also mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila. That's Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Rupa Goswami. He mentions that devotional service in practice has 2 divisions. There's 2 aspects of devotional service in practice. One is called vaidhi, and the other one is called raganuga, spontaneous. Okay, so keep that in mind. Devotional service in practice has 2 divisions: regulative, vaidhi, and spontaneous. Now, what's the difference between the 2? That will become more apparent as we go through Suddha Bhakti Cintamani. But the basic difference between the 2 is what impels the practitioner to perform devotional service. All right? So that's the main difference. It's the internal inspiration. So the impetus for regulative devotional service is faith in scripture and sometimes fear of the consequences of not following scripture. I think we brought this up as a discussion last week. Why do we chant Hare Krishna? If we've been initiated, we made vows to chant Hare Krishna. Why do we do it? Or why do we not? Yeah. Why do we do it? Because we've been told to. Because we're fearful of not doing it. So that's called vaidhi. Yeah. Now, yeah, so the impetus for regulative devotional service is fear. Maharaj describes as fear of the consequences of disobeying scripture. And the impetus for what's known as raganuga, or spontaneous devotion, it's natural. I emphasize this word, it's natural and intense longing for Krishna's service. This longing is also known in Sanskrit as lobha. All right, so that's the difference between the 2. Vaidhi, but they're both aspects of sadhana. Vaidhi sadhana and raganuga sadhana. Yeah. Now, which path to follow? Again, if you have any questions on this, it's often misunderstood, so please feel free to ask. What path a devotee may follow, either vaidhi or raganuga, is obviously going to depend on their qualification. So it can't be artificial. So this taking up of raganuga sadhana, it shouldn't be something artificial. Yeah. Now, so how do we know what is our qualification? Well, then we have to take guidance. We best not make our own ascertainment without the guidance of the spiritual master and senior Vaishnavas to actually know our qualification. But Maharaj brings out here that generally it's understood that very few devotees are initially fit for spontaneous devotion. Do you follow that? That very few are initially, in the beginning, ready for spontaneous devotion. So that's not what we teach devotees when they first come to our temples or we're first preaching to them. We do not preach to them the details of a practice of raganuga sadhana. We're generally going to teach them about the details of vaidhi, the regulative practice. So that's where most devotees will begin, by following the path of regulative devotion, right? Not the path of spontaneous sadhana. Okay? Any questions? We will understand that? Yeah. And yes. So the question then might arise, why are so few devotees initially qualified for what is spontaneous devotion? Yeah. Well, basically, Maharaj brings out here that he uses the word neophytes, or even intermediate devotees. They don't come with this greed necessarily. They don't come and they got this deep longing to obtain Krishna. They don't have this deep longing to serve in the same mood as the residents of Vrindavan. It's when people first come, that is generally not there. Yeah. So, um, so, so that basically that's why there's so few are qualified for spontaneous devotion in the beginning. Yeah. So this is the reason why Lord Chaitanya's followers, and specifically we're speaking of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada, advises devotees without this spontaneous greed or this greed, he advises us to practice regulative devotion. Okay, we follow? Any questions? Please feel free to ask.
Is regulative devotional service sadhana bhakti? Vaidhi sadhana bhakti.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay.
Now, the point to note here, it's mentioned later, but I'll bring it up here, is that someone who's practicing raganuga sadhana, it doesn't mean they're liberated souls. They may still be practitioners. It's a practice. Yeah. Okay. Now, both the external activities of regulative and spontaneous, they are the same. Yeah. Those practicing regulative devotional service sing Mangalati. Those practicing spontaneous devotional service sing the prayers of Mangalati. Those practicing regulative devotional service attend Srimad Bhagavatam or hear Srimad Bhagavatam class at home. Those practicing regular spontaneous devotional service also hear Srimad Bhagavatam class. Yet those practicing regulative devotional service engage in some form of sankirtana. Those who are practicing spontaneous devotion service also perform some aspect of sankirtan, and both of them serve the mission in our ISKCON society. They serve the mission of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Yeah. So, okay, you follow that? So the external activities are the same. Yeah. So this study that Maharaj is going to focus on here is going to be studying the angas and the practice of sadhana bhakti. So within the context of regulative devotional service. Okay, we're going step by step here, so we all kind of have a clear picture of this. What is vaidhi sadhana? Mainly vaidhi sadhana and raganuga sadhana. We're not going to get so much into details of raganuga sadhana here. Okay, because this is we're going to be speaking about the practice of regulative devotional service, which is followed by both. Has that made everyone more confused or more clarification? Mother Vishalni, is this understood? Is this making sense?
It does make sense, but I would like you to expand a little bit more.
Yeah, go on. You want to expand?
Yes, please, no, you expand. So I would like to know more.
Okay. Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned. Okay, so now again, we mentioned there's a common misunderstanding which Maharaj Srila Swami Maharaj makes in quite a few of his books in the introductions that, and I mentioned it earlier on, that the misunderstanding among many may be that spontaneous devotional service appears only at the stage when you've achieved bhava, and thus it's only for liberated souls. Okay. Now we hear how Rupa Goswami he gives this twofold division of devotional service that reveals that this assumption, just using Maharaj's direct words here, is incorrect. Now, Prabhupada in the Nectar Devotion, he gives a basic qualification for which one may take up the practices of spontaneous devotion as being the stage of nishta, yeah, when more or less the gross impurities have been purified from the heart. That would be the basic qualification. Okay. Now, there's good reasons why it's not discouraged, or why beginning devotees are discouraged from practicing this spontaneous devotion, and that's going to be spoken of later. Yeah, Marge will get into more details about that. Yeah, so the main point we're making here is that that spontaneous devotion is one of two aspects of practice. Yeah, it's two aspects of sadhana bhakti, and Marge mentions it's the sole aspect of bhava and prema. It's all spontaneous at that stage. All right.
This is the Nishta stage, is it?
Well, the Nishta
spontaneous
stage is the basic qualification where one might take up a spontaneous practice. But again, this spontaneous practice is internal. It's your internal inspiration for performing the angas of bhakti. So spontaneous devotional service means you have an attraction and you're developing a specific attraction. Yeah, but it's internal.
Okay.
Someone who's practicing regulative devotional service, they will be inspired in following the principles of bhakti and following the orders of the spiritual master. Okay. Now, from that will purify their heart, and at some point, they will naturally become more attracted in a natural way. Yeah. The point is that generally, introduction to devotional service is going to be through the path of regulative practice, not necessarily a raganuga sadhana in the general. Okay. Any other questions for anyone? Alexander, you understand?
I don't have any questions at the moment.
All right. Okay. All right. So now what kind of regulative devotion? So the question brought up here is, what role does it play? Because the mission of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu is to bless souls with Raj Bhakti, with spontaneous devotion experienced by the residents of Vrindavan. So we've just mentioned it, but sometimes just to be even more clear on it. Yeah. Because sometimes what happens is those not qualified, they reject regulative devotion and may artificially take up practices of spontaneous devotion, which can cause havoc in our society and in their own spiritual lives. Say, for example, someone joins a temple. They join a devotional community. They're there for 3 or 4 months, 5 months. They take up chanting 16 rounds. They're kind of just about managed to get themselves of following the 3 regulative principles. Then they get more strength and they're following the 4 regulative principles for perhaps 2 months or 3 months. Yeah. And but still they're dealing with they're on the stage of unsteady devotion or unsteady devotion. Sometimes they're at war with the senses, and past impressions of their or past sensual impressions often distract them from their japa. But they're doing their best and they're following. Yeah. They're following. They're trying to reach the stage of being fixed in devotional service. And then they become inspired. Then they hear about Vrindavan after practicing devotional service for like a year or so. And they hear about Vrindavan and they want to go to Vrindavan. You know, they got some time and they've got some money they've saved. And they go to Vrindavan. And then they go and then they go to Radhakund. And then they see these Babajis who are chanting all day. And they chant 64 rounds every day. And they become they become attracted to that. And they also want to take up that practice. They really want to give their whole life to Krishna. They really want to surrender to Krishna. And they look at these Babajis who are living at Radhakund, and they've read Nectar of Devotion, or they've read Nectar of Instruction, and it glorifies Radhakund as being the most sacred place. So then they sit down by the Babajis, then they get initiation, and they get told to chant 64 rounds a day. And they get told specific meditations to actually do on the Krishna's pastimes. So don't forget, I've explained that the persons are hardly at the stage of being fixed in devotional service. They're still struggling with their sensual, with their past previous activities in material life, you know, and they've taken up this artificial. They're actually not ready for it. You get the picture? Yeah. So sometimes again, Maharaj writes, sometimes neophytes reject regulative devotional service and artificially take up the practice of spontaneous devotion. So it can create havoc. Yeah. Okay. Or it can work the other way, where devotees reject the path of Raj Bhakti. They follow the regular principles that they want to attain one of the Vaikuntha planets. Yeah. And it's often a misconception is based on this verse here. Someone like to read this for us? Good to hear some other devotees.
By performing such regulated devotional service in awe and venerance, one may go to Vaikuntha and attain the 4 kinds of liberation.
Okay, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila 3:17. Yeah. So sometimes this verse is quoted and it's misquoted. So in other words, the Babaji may accuse us, look, you're practicing regulative devotional service. According to Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila 3:17, that means you're going to Vaikuntha. You're not going to Braj. So you should sit down with me. You should get the idea. Or sometimes it may, as we mentioned, it may be the other way around. Oh, okay. So let's set our goal on Vaikuntha. It says here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilita 3:17. Okay, I'm practicing regulative devotion. Okay, so therefore I'm going to Vaikuntha. Yeah. All right. So how to understand this? Do we want to understand it? Yes. Okay. So the essence Maharaj describes is understanding the proper mood in which devotees of Lord Chaitanya take up regulative devotional service. What is the specific mood that we take up the regulative practice of devotional service? So he mentions it as 2 aspects. So you might want to write this down. This is different from the Sri Vaishnavas who practice regulative devotion and they're worshipping specifically to go to Vaikuntha. Lord Caitanya is giving us the opportunity to go to Goloka Vrindavan, and we follow regulative devotion in the beginning. Yeah, but the specific mood that we follow it in is two. The first is that Shama Sundara of Vrindavan is our worshipable deity, is our Ishtadev. So we're following regulative devotional service in the mood, being very clear what our worshipable deity is. Yeah, we do not worship any other form of Godhead. We don't worship Vishnu. We've got nothing against Vishnu. Okay. But our specific worship is Radha Krishna, Jugala Kishore. Here Maharaj mentions Shama Sundar of Vrindavan. Yeah. And the second is having faith in that the regulative practice following the loving will, following eventually the loving mood of the inhabitants of Vrindavan is the way to achieve Shama Sundara. Yeah. So we practice the path of regulative devotion, and the heart gets gradually purified, and then a natural attraction will awaken because we're following our regulative devotion with the understanding of our Ishtadev and the place that we want to go. That's the difference between our regulative practice and the practice of the Sri Vaishnavas, for example. Is that clear? All right?
Yeah.
Yes, right. Thank you, Swami Vishanu. Okay. So if we practice regulative devotion with these 2 points in mind, it will lead to spontaneous practice, and that in itself will lead to Vrindavan. Yeah. And Srila Prabhupada, yeah, or is it letter? Yeah. Yeah, Prabhupada says it. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 354. States, Maharaj is just quoting directly here. Srila Prabhupada states that devotional service performed under the regulative principles helps devotees to rise to the stage of rag bhakti. Yeah. Okay. So, in other words, externally, the regulative devotion of the followers of Lord Caitanya or our ISKCON society may bear the same name and appearance as Vaikuntha Vaidhi Bhakti. But the two are set apart by different moods and goals. So it's a different mood and there's a different goal. Yeah. Someone could read this letter. This kind of Prabhupada expresses this here. This is a letter from or to Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
Okay, I'll read.
Yeah.
Regarding your second question, what determines whether a devotee goes to Vaikuntha planet or to Golok Vrindavan? Those devotees who are following Vidhi Marga are meant for going to Vaikuntha planets, and those who are following Raga Marga are meant for going to Krishna Lok. It is generally accepted that the followers of Lord Caitanya are going to Golok Vrindavan. Letter to Tamal Krishna, Los Angeles, 21st June.
It's interesting, isn't it? This reply, this letter to Tamal Krishna. First, he makes it quite clear. Those who are following Vaidhi Marg are going to Vaikuntha. Those who are following Rag Marg are going to a Krishna Loka. But he says generally those who are following our Lord Caitanya, they're going to Goloka Vrindavan. Yeah. So it's Rag Marg. But we don't prematurely suppose ourselves on that platform. We're following the regulative devotion by which our heart gets purified. And then as we become purified, then our devotion becomes more natural. All right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So Marge gives a conclusion. I'll just read it. Of how we should practice devotional service. So we shouldn't we should neither reject the path of Raj Bhakti, nor should we take it up prematurely. Yeah. So we shouldn't reject it, nor should we take it up prematurely. So continuing to read here. Unless they genuinely desire Vaikuntha Bhakti, their patient fidelity to the regulative principles of devotional service will, in good time, mature into spontaneous service of the Raj Vasis. Yeah, if we follow it in the mood that Maharaj mentioned. So what's the 2 points that Maharaj mentioned? What's the underlying mood for us in our ISKCON society for following regulative devotional service? Sorry to put you on the spot. Mentioned two aspects. The mood has 2 aspects.
We shouldn't reject Raja Bhakti.
Yeah, that we just mentioned. I'm looking for something more specific. What's our goal?
Oh, look.
Shama Sundara. Yeah. Yeah. That's our goal. Yeah. That's Ishtadev. And the second one is having faith that following will bring us to having faith in the loving, following in a loving mood, eventually of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, is the way to achieve Shama Sundara. Okay, it sounds like we're supposed to be speaking about regulative devotional service here, but we seem to be keep bringing out many aspects of spontaneous devotion. All right. But so anyway, let's continue. So Marge now brings up in a kind of different direction. What's the purpose of all the regulations? And I guess the slide here gives it away. Yeah. So practicing devotees, by definition, feel a concern for following scripture injunctions, because for us, that's the means for approaching Krishna. The specific scripture injunctions that we actually follow. But it can be a bit confusing because there's many recommendations of do's and don'ts which are found in the scripture, in the Nectar of Devotion, in other books as well. So some of them can even appear contradictory. So it can be a source of bewilderment. So therefore, there's this famous verse that's quoted here in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yeah. So it gives us a guideline for us practicing sadhana, how to resolve conflict in do's and don'ts. So the essence of all the rules and regulations, I think some of us might know this, is this. Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu, okay? Krishna doesn't come from Vishnu, it's the other way around, okay? Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu. He should always be remembered and never forgotten at any time. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in Sastras should be servants of these 2 principles. So that's a kind of a bit of a guiding light to help us. Sometimes it can be quite confusing if we read and study. There's so many things that we should do, so many things that we shouldn't do. But the essence of them all is that we want to always remember Krishna. And that's only possible for advanced devotees, but or at least we should try. Yeah. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, he actually brings this out, that this, what's mentioned here, is not really possible for the practitioner. Yeah. But at least once or twice a day, we can remember Krishna. Yeah. At least once or twice a day. Prabhupada said we should think of Krishna 25 hours a day. Yeah, then you can work that one out. He said 25 hours a day in one day. It's only 24 hours in a day. Prabhupada says we should think of him 25 hours a day. All right. So how to do that, Marge actually gets into this. Actually, how can one always think of Krishna? Yeah. Now, as we mentioned, if you've got a natural, it's natural if a person you have a person in love, anyone had that problem in the material world? Is it a problem? from the material platform, when you have someone you love, you're always absorbed in thoughts of them. You can be always, I won't go into details from before I joined Krishna consciousness, but it's a fact. You're just absorbed. You're just thinking 24/7, So it's the same. So when advanced devotees, they're approaching the stage of what's known as bhava or ecstatic devotion, that they will constantly think about Krishna. Yeah. And that's the perfection of Krishna consciousness. Now, otherwise, at the early stages of Krishna consciousness, one may not be so advanced and we cannot remember Krishna. And not only that, we may be struggling with bad habits and influences. And our affection may be less mature. So if it's less mature, then it's less intense. Yeah. So taking this into consideration, Rupa Goswami wrote Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and he quotes, and also Sanatana Goswami in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. And they've compiled rules of devotion to help us sadhakas fix their minds upon Krishna. Yeah, this is from Nectar of Devotion. Because it's Rupa Goswami who gives the process from faith. He gives this 9-step process. Ado, Shraddha, Tato, Sadhu, Sangha, Bhajankriya, Anata, Nivritti, Ruchi, Nishta, Ruchi, Nishta, Shakti, Bhava, and Prema. Gives this step-by-step progress, So Rupa Goswami, he gives in the Nectar of Devotion, you can find it, he selected 64 prominent rules of devotional service. So how can we practice regulative devotional service? So it's there in the Nectar of Devotion. So he took it also from the Hari Bhakti Vilas. Yeah. So, and Maharaj brings out here that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions that Rupa Goswami's 64 items is also found in instructions to Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So who's done the Bhakti Sastri here? Anyone done Bhakti Sastri? Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, so you might have gone over that you might have gone over all those 64 items of devotional service. For instance, for example, it means paying obeisances when you enter the temple, wearing the Mahabhashad of the Lord, taking Mahabhashadam, dancing for the pleasure of the Lord. What others is there? Hearing. Well, we'll speak about the 5 most important ones. Worshipping Tulsi, etc. Now, of those 64, some are for the body, like paying obeisances, it's mentioned there. Some are for the senses, smelling the flowers that's been offered to the Lord. Yeah. And some are for the mind, which means offering prayers to the Lord. Yeah. It's all mentioned there. So in other words, this is devotional service in practice. It means engaging the body, mind, and senses in Krishna's service. Again, because we don't have a natural attraction. We don't have such a deep greed. So therefore, Rupa Goswami is telling us what to do so that greed will actually manifest. Excuse me. Any questions at this point? Yeah. Now you will.
The greed we should aspire for?
Sorry again?
How do we aspire the greed?
How do we get greed? By following the regulative principles of devotional service.
And how do we intensify it?
By following what's given by Rupa Goswami very sincerely and very attentively. Yeah. What's there in Nectar Devotion, very sincerely. Yeah. And and with attention. Yeah, that's how it can. If you want to make advancement, just pay attention to your rounds. Okay. bring rapt attention to Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah.
And increase the intention.
Sorry, Alexander?
An increase the intention.
Yeah, increase intention. Can you explain a bit more? Increase intention?
Do more.
Do more. Oh yeah, do more.
That's boost.
Yeah, do more. Do a bit more. Chant 17 rounds. Chant 18 rounds.
One extra prayer.
Yeah, one extra prayer. Is that okay, Mother Vishali? Just so a quick answer to your question.
Yeah. Yes. How to intensify.
Yeah, it's to do what we've been given by Rupa Goswami. Yeah. Now, sometimes someone may reach perfection by just practicing one of the 64 items. So some by practicing more than one. Yeah. But the result, if you're practicing one or more, the result will be constant remembrance of Krishna. Yeah. Now, then I'd spend some time speaking about the genius of Srila Prabhupada in a way to engage his disciples, not just his disciples, but the whole world, in fixing a mind upon Krishna. Yeah. And at the same time, he gives us a practice by which we can fix our mind upon Krishna and fulfill the mission of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu and his Sankirtan mission. So one of the ways, as we know, Srila Prabhupada's genius, and which is very much still alive today in ISKCON, is, anyone can tell what that is? What did he ask his disciples to do?
Distribute books.
Distribute books, you got it, yes. That's Prabhupada's genius. You know, Maharaj mentions he gave them instructions to distribute books, and he mentions also enrollment of life members. And there's a quote from Prabhupada here from Majja Lila. When one goes with a Sankirtan party or to sell books, he naturally thinks that he is going to sell Krishna's book. In this way, he is remembering Krishna. Yeah. So Prabhupada, yes, he wanted Krishna consciousness to spread, but he also wanted devotees to always be absorbed in Krishna. So this practice done both. So that's why Prabhupada emphasized it as well. Yes, to spread Krishna consciousness, but to keep his disciples' minds fixed on Krishna. Yeah. So in other words, Prabhupada didn't restrict the concept of smaran or meditating on Krishna for more pastimes. Yes, he actually gave full engagement. So in speaking about Krishna, yeah, he full engagement in a Krishna service, especially in speaking about him. Like this is an old picture here, I think from the 70s, you know, where devotees open Srimad Bhagavatam and he's speaking about Krishna. So that's the essence of the instructions of Rupa Goswami. Yeah. Always thinking of Krishna. Yeah. Yeah, Marge mentions here, perhaps not all of us are young men or women here, some might be, but young men and women especially can dovetail their exuberance with this noble cause. By so doing, they purify their hearts and acquire the ability to think of Krishna at will. Yes, that was my experience when I first joined the temple. Within, I think 6 months or 7 months, I was in the back of a van traveling through the south of England, distributing books. Yeah. And it was exactly that. I was using a young, exuberant, youthful energy in a Krishna service. Yeah. So this is Prabhupada's, and okay, when we may not be doing that as a full-time service, but everything in connection to ISKCON is part of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. So you may be dressing the deities, you're serving the Sankirtan movement. These deities are part of the Sankirtan movement. Or you may be doing admin in a temple. That's part of the Sankirtan movement. You are supporting and taking part in the Sankirtan of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. the same time, we should want, when we get the opportunity, if we can, either go on book distribution or we can sponsor some book distribution like that as well. Okay. So if you want to find out, now we don't have time, or this particular study we're doing is not focusing on all these 64 items of regulative practice. If you want, you can go to Nectar Devotion, chapters 6 to 14. Might be good. Perhaps some of us have not read Nectar Devotion for 3 or 4 years or for 5 years. So it'd be good just to remind ourselves of what are the angas of regulative devotion. And there's a list there from chapters 6 to 14. Rupa Goswami gives 64 items. Yeah. Now, I think some of you might know where we're going to next. Of those 64 items, 5 items, there's 5 main items. And this is, again, Bhakta Sastri students should know this. The five main items of devotion. So these are prime importance: Sadhu Sangha, Nam Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravana, Mathoravas, Sri Muttaye Shabdaya Sevana. One should associate with devotees, chant the holy name of the Lord, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, reside at Mathura, and worship the deity with faith and veneration. Okay. So in the 64 items, the first 20 items of devotional service are very important. They comprise 10 do's and 10 don'ts. So we don't have the list here. I was thinking I should have got the list here, but perhaps you can look in your own time. So the first 20 items of Rupa Goswami's 64 items are the most important. And in those 20, 10 are do's and 10 are do nots. So the do's, that's the foundation of our regulative devotional service, because that's what this chapter is about. Regulative devotional service. Yeah. So, and in answer to Mother Vishalni's question, again here, Prabhupada here, the list of do's forms the foundation of regulative devotional service, and their strict observance assures rapid advancement in Krishna consciousness. So the strict observance to this list of do's assures rapid advancement in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada writes, success is sure to the rigid practitioner. Any questions out there? Any questions or comments? Alexander, you had your hand raised.
Yes, there is actually a very nice book I got for kids. It's called Becoming Your Devotee, and it's actually exactly it says about, not sure if everyone sees, about the 10 do's, 10 don'ts, and then the rest of the most important and the five most powerful items. So it's a very nice visual representation about these things. It's good for teaching.
Do you have the book there? You can
Yeah.
You can put it up to the camera. You can see. There you go. Becoming, what does it say? Becoming
Your Devotee is there is part 1 and part 2 by Gauranga Gandharvika Devidasi. Very nice for a lot of exercise, and it's a visual presentation about the 64 items, and it separates the do's, the don'ts, the other important items, and the 5 most powerful items.
Yeah.
Which is chanting the holy name, worship the deities.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Yeah. So perhaps there's something we could do. Sometimes we might be feeling a bit of a lull in our enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness, or we might be feeling a little bit inspired. So you can open up Nectar Devotion or get this book here and just do a checklist of all those 64 items and see how many you're doing or how many you're not doing. Then you can think, okay, I'm missing out here. I'm missing out. I'm missing this. I'm missing this. Okay, let me do the tick, check, have like a checklist, you know. Be good. Now here's some details that Maharaj gives. So let me just read. So avoiding the do nots, that removes obstacles to advancement. So if you want to know, yeah, what are the obstacles? So that's listed there. Now, Srila Prabhupada adds that the first 3 items are most essential. Again, of the first 20, the 10s are do's, 10s are don'ts. Of the do's, the first 3 are most essential. Can anyone perhaps hazard a philosophical speculation of what those first 3 are? Except those who got the book in, well, if you've got the book in front of you, you can also give. Anyone? The first 3? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Guru Pad Ashraya is the first one, yeah? So anyone knows what that means? Guru Pad Ashraya? Guru Pad Ashraya?
Take the shelter of a spiritual master.
Yeah, you've got that. Yeah, take a shelter. Take initiation is part of regulative devotional service, and a very important part. At some point in our development, we want to take initiation. Now, for some, it might be 2 years, 3 years, some it might be longer. But it has to be there, has to be in place. Yeah. So Rupa Goswami gives that. Guru Pad Ashraya. And then next is Shri Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam. So why do we take shelter of a spiritual master? Well, then we serve him with respect and reverence. Yeah. Okay. So the first 3. That's Guru Padashraya, Shri Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam, and Vishrambena Guru Seva. Okay. Now back to these 5. These are very powerful. I just read this section here. We often speak this when we're speaking about deity worship. It is difficult to understand the wonderful potency of these 5. So these 5 here of devotional service. So having a slight connection with any of them, even when one has no faith, can awaken a person's dormant love of God. All right, did you hear that? Even without faith, they're so powerful. Of course, the person has to be not offensive. If one is innocent and they come in touch with one of these, a sadhu, yeah, a kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, or the Holy Dham. Some of you just come back from Vrindavan. Yeah. It can stir feelings of love. Of course, one has to take up and practice devotion in earnest to at some point be situated in that love. So it may come and it may go, but still it can be quite overwhelming sometimes. So sometimes we see some persons may inadvertently come in contact with Rafa Yatra. I've seen that, where someone like a member of the public starts crying, and they're feeling all these things are going in their heart, and they don't know why or where it's come from. Yeah, so they're very powerful. So what to speak of someone who's practicing them in earnest. Yeah. And regarding deity worship, Maharaj brings out here, Mathurava Sri Muddaye. Rupa Goswami, he gives a warning here in a very wonderful way. He gives a warning. And it's interesting because when it speaks about, it's got the section on deity worship, and it doesn't speak specifically about worshipping the deity. Instead, Rupa Goswami gives this verse here, and I'll just read it, and I'm sure some of you will have heard of it. I just say the first three words, and perhaps someone could paraphrase what comes next. My dear friend. Anyone familiar with this verse? My dear friend. Okay, I give another couple of words. If you are indeed attached to your worldly friends. What comes next?
Do not go to the bank of the Jamuna, because what you're going to find there, it will destroy all your material expectations. And I'm just paraphrasing the verse.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay Krishna got it. Well done. Yeah, Rupa Goswami says in speaking about deity worship, because we're absorbed in worshipping the deity, and this is the effect. It's actually is Krishna's personally present. So Rupa Goswami quotes this: my dear friend, if you are indeed attached to your worldly friends, do not look at the smiling face of Lord Govinda as he stands on the bank of the Yamuna at Keshigat. So we could change it a bit. You could say, my dear friend, if you're indeed attached to your worldly friends, do not go to Bhakti and look at the smiling face of Radha Gokulananda. Or for those attached to London, my dear friend, if you're indeed attached to your worldly friends, don't go to that temple in central London and look at that beautiful smiling place of Radha Landaneshwara, who's standing on the altar. Yeah, that would be the beginning of the end of your spiritual life. So stay away. So Rupa Goswami uses reverse logic. So finishing the verse, casting sidelong glances, he places his flute to his lips, which seem like new blossoming twigs. This is his lips. His transcendental body bending in three places appears very bright in the moonlight. So interesting. Rupa Goswami, in speaking about deity worship, this is what he quotes here. Let's check. We've got 3 minutes left. Let's see where we go here. Now, I'll just finish on this part where Marge mentions that although these are very powerful, these limbs, these 5 limbs of devotional practice, to manifest the full effect of these, it's a little bit tempered in Kali Yuga. You know, practically basic by the reality of, perhaps you could say, conditioned offensive nature. So Marge just mentions that here. So people, then he quotes Payene apeso sabya kalo asmin yuge janaha manda samanda matayo manda upagi upadhyata. I'm just conscious of the time because I want to finish on a positive note. So therefore, we may not get the immediate benefits which are offered by these 5, yeah, with these 5 here. So we do have to acquire faith, and then we have to progressively develop that faith through the different stages that Rupa Goswami gives. Okay. So someone may, like the question that may come, while for a very exceptional person who are freed of offense, faith is not always a prerequisite for loving devotion. You know, that takes us, but generally people in common devoid of the purity, then we have to acquire faith to actually attain the goal of love of Godhead. So it is part of our process. So the point that Maharaj is making here, although this verse mentions without faith, it doesn't mean that faith is not required in the development of Krishna consciousness. It is required, but we should understand that these 5 items of devotion are so powerful that they can give rise to a love of Godhead. It doesn't mean that we don't follow the other angles, angas of devotion. Okay. And there's a bit more here. Any questions or comments? Perhaps we'll stop here. A pause. Seems to go quite quick, isn't it? It's a bit short. But any closing comments or questions from anyone? So today we discussed about regulative devotion. We've gone into it a bit. That there's, because we're speaking about regulative devotion, there's 2 parts of regulative devotion. There is spontaneous sadhana and vaidhi sadhana. So we explained that basically they're basically the same externally, but the impetus for each one is different. The mood that we follow, our regulative practice, is that Shama Sundar, Krishna is the goal. That's the goal. The purpose, all the regulations, and there's many, is to remember Krishna. How to remember Krishna? Prabhupada gave us a massive society to run and manage and to spread Krishna consciousness. Then Maharaj gives, going into more details, he begins to explain the nectar devotion, and Rupa Goswami, how he instructs how we can think of Krishna if we don't have a natural greed to think of Krishna. So he gives these 64 items of devotion. Of those, 5 are most important. And also important is also the first 3, taking shelter of a spiritual master. Yeah. So next week we'll speak more about chanting as being the most important. Okay, and a bit more about deity worship. Okay, so thank you for your kind attention, everyone. I hope this was some interest. And don't forget, if you haven't read Nectar Devotion for a couple of years, for 3 years, just sit down, chapters 16, I think, to 21, and have a little inventory of how many of those you're doing or how many you're not. Okay, and don't forget, Mother Vishalni asked a question: how can we speed up the whole process? By following these very sincerely. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your kind attention, and look forward to seeing you next week. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu, so much.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Bhakti.
Hare Krishna.
Pītānām pāvanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namo.
Namo Namah.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Krishna Hare
Hare
Hare,
Ram,
Hare
Ram
Ram,
Ram,
Hare
Ram,
Ram,
Hare
Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Bol.